This story is a perfect illustration of how a dictatorial system can have an impact, not just while it's going on, but even years after that, because this is happening 5 years or 6 years almost after communism fell. All right, friend, it's Friday, and you know what that means. It's story time. Yes, that's right. On this day 21 of 77 of cycling to work, or in this case, back home from work. And the story today is from communist Romania. And it has to do with one of the main reasons I ended up coming here to the United States. See, I was born in Romania, grew up there, spent the first 2 decades of my life during the last portion of the communist dictatorship there. And then I started med school and graduated in '94. So that was 5 years after communism fell. We did a year of internship after that because they didn't quite know what to do with us. It was a period of transition. And finally in '95, they had us sit for a residency exam. And the idea was to decide what doctor goes to what specialty and in what town based on the available slots that they had. See, the country had about 6 medical schools at that time, and there was about 10,000 of us sitting for that exam. And on a Sunday, they got us all in a big amphitheater. There were many amphitheaters in town, in the city that participated in that. I was in a big amphitheater with a bunch of my colleagues, and we got a booklet with questions and multiple answers. Remember, this was in '95, at least in Romania, before personal computers or testing centers had computers, so it was all on paper. And for 6 hours, more or less, we had to go through hundreds of such questions to provide answers and so forth. And it was all good and fun until the results came in. And when I went to look, I was shocked to see on the top of the list, the first 30 or so spots were taken by colleagues of mine, mostly males, that I knew not just from med school, but even from doing 9 months of military service with them before med school. See, in Romania, military service during communism was mandatory. And if you made it to a university or med school from your first try, like I did, then you only did 9 months of military service, and you also had the privilege to do it with your future colleagues. So spending 9 times day and night with these guys, I got to know them quite well, plus throughout 6 years of medical school. And here I was looking at the list and seeing these guys occupying the top 30 or so spots. And, you know, it wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary to see that, except for the fact that those guys were far from being the best students. I mean, they are cool guys. You could hang out with them. They were partying every weekend. And then when the exams would come for the last few days, they would cram and study hard, just enough to pass. But they were not the top students, that's what I'm saying. And yet here they were getting the best scores. I was like, man, that looks awfully strange. And I was not alone in that impression. Turns out what these guys had done, one of their parents had connections that allowed him to be in touch with the military commander or whoever it was that over the weekend before the exam guarded those test booklets. And he got hold of one. And then his son shared it with his friend and his friend with his friend. So about 30 of them got it over that weekend and studied hard, and as they used to do anyways, right? Right before the exam. And they got maximum, very close to maximum scores on the day of the test. And when we got to select the residency spot, the way it worked, we are also, all of us this time in Bucharest, in a huge convention hall, and they would call your name wherever your turn came, and you would select a specialty and the location based on the position on the list that you are in. And even though I made it in the first 10%, by the time my name was called, the internal medicine slots that I was interested in were all gone in Bucharest. These guys had taken them all together with other even more competitive slots like cardiology, surgery, neurology, dermatology, you know, all those sought after slots were long gone because they had a handful here and there, so there weren't that many available. So I got infectious disease, and that's what I did for the next 5 years. It was clear to me and many of our colleagues that there was something awfully wrong with this test. And in fact, the next year in '96, when the same thing happened, the fraud was so widespread at that time that 1 in 5 candidates cheated. They got the test booklets beforehand. They got such an anomaly on the score results. It was not anywhere near to a normal distribution, which is what you expect to see on an exam like that. You have most people in the middle, and then as you move toward the top or toward the bottom of the spectrum, you have less and less people. This was a bunch of people at the top, and then you had your normal distribution after that. So the outrage was so big that they actually canceled the results of that exam the year after mine, and they had to retake it a few months later. In my year, though, the fraud was not so extensive, and everybody got to keep what they stole. We have a saying in Romanian, if you are a thief but you are not caught, you are an honest tradesperson. Hoțul neprins, negustor cinstit. Anyways, so to this day, I sometimes check their profile, some of these colleagues from those days, and one is a well-known dermatologist in Bucharest. A bunch of them are cardiologists and things like that. And to think that, I'm not saying they are terrible doctors, but to think that you get to that top privileged position by cheating in such an awful manner, it was absolutely disgusting. Not only that, when I finished those 5 years of infectious disease residency, I started a private medical clinic in Bucharest with a couple of other colleagues of mine. And as an infectionist, though, it wasn't much for me to do in an outpatient setting, which is what I wanted in the first place. Plus, to get any approval, because I got to do a lot of the admin work by the nature of my specialty, it was an ordeal, because you had to bribe everybody left and right, or have connections, which I didn't, in high places to do that. And again, this was almost 10 years after communism, technically speaking, been erased from the system. But the effects were still so prevalent that by 2001 or so, when an opportunity arose for me to come and do a master's program in nutrition here in the United States, I took it because I felt like there was no future professionally for me in that system. It's finally coming along a little bit. There is still a lot of that mentality is still there, but at least there is some progress being made, and that I celebrate. But it's been 30 years since I graduated, so had I stayed there, I think it would have been a tough time professionally. And I don't mind tough times when they are tough because of objective external factors, but when it's about corruption and communist mentality, I don't like that. So this is what such a system causes people to experience. I would have never come to the US had it not been for that, probably. And I appreciate the system here. There's corruption everywhere, of course, but at least if you are serious, if you are motivated, if you work hard, you can make it in most fields here in the US. And that, my friend, is the story for today. I'll see you next week. You stay healthy and you stay active.